And welcome back to WealthWise with me, your host, Jordan Kimmel. And you see him, you recognize him. It's Gary Antonacci. Gary, thanks so much for joining us on Veterans Day.
My pleasure, Jordan.
And before we get into it, I want to thank you for your service. We talked about it before air. I know you were on. I want to hold this up. This was my dad's campaign from World War II. He's no longer with us, but we love you, Dad. Thanks for serving. And Gary, thank you for serving. And want to just talk 1 minute about service and maybe what it taught you?
Sure.
Go
Uh,
ahead.
well, discipline was the main thing. I was 18 years old when I went into the Army and went to Vietnam. So you learn a lot that can help you in life. Just in terms of discipline and doing what's expected of you, and just having a responsible attitude because a lot's at stake.
Lots at stake. And you know what amazes me is the youth and the young running these big $100 million planes and warships and because they show up to do their job. And hey, while I'm thinking about it, let's point out here on your book, Dual Momentum Investing, which I read cover to cover. And there's a nice, if I remember, there was a introduction by someone who I had met from AAII, and we'll come back to that. Anyway, so let's talk about your model. It's dual momentum investing, and I'll let you explain it, but there's absolute and there's relative. You like to run them together, and you've done it with a lot of success. So explain the model overall, and then I have some detailed questions.
Well, I have a number of different models, but they're all based on trend following and relative strength. Now, trend following has different aspects. There are different ways of determining trend. The one we use is rate of change, and we call it absolute momentum. Academics call it time series momentum. It's basically whether an asset has been going up or down over a proven look back period. That indicates whether it's going to continue to do the same. So momentum is persistence in performance. So that's the first part of it. And then once we determine whether an asset or group of assets is going to go up and or down based on absolute momentum, then we have to determine which asset to be in. And for that, we use relative strength by comparing the strength of one asset to another or an asset to an index. So my models all incorporate those two principles.
Okay, and so let's just go back. We'll take one step forward before we take a couple back. So the idea is that there's been studies after studies that show a couple of major factors have worked long time, and they are momentum, their value, its price, and size, right? And but for the last 10 years, three of those proven strategies kind of have been on the sidelines where momentum kind of took center stage. And I'm thinking, Gary, is that the momentum side has puffed its chest out so big, people forgot about value.
Well, you have to make a distinction between factors that are explanatory and ones that are predictive. That they don't necessarily mean the same thing. So you have to examine the the aspect of causality. And Lopez de Pardo has some good work in that area. Now, the thing about momentum, which makes it attractive uh, to my point of view, is that there's a good explanation for it, behaviorally. You can't say that so much for the other factors. You have to just say, okay, maybe they're based on risks being different than people perceive them to be. So that's a different ball game. But if you can get into behavioral factors, those tend to persist because the way that people think and react emotionally in the marketplace, that doesn't change. It remains relatively constant. So with momentum and trend, we're looking at initial underreaction where people don't pay attention to what's going on initially. Uh,
Hmm.
but eventually, prices have to catch up with their value. So that creates trends. And then once the trends get going, people notice that, and there's fear of missing out, and they won't jump on those trends. You have the bandwagon effect, and that because of that, the trends persist. Now, I don't think you can make
Right.
that same argument for some of the other factors. You can make other arguments, like mean reversion. So that's the basis for value investing to some extent. And studies have shown that over a 3 to 5 year period, there is some catch up that takes place
Right.
because people overreact to bad news as well as good news.
Right. So I really enjoyed the way you coupled in the human emotion, and there's a couple of them at play in their fear and their greed and their sides of the coin. And there's really no doubt that what you're saying is that, and that's why people, use charts and they use support and resistance levels and human nature, fear and greed and getting out evenitis and all those kind of things that I like to, think about. But one thing I want to ask you is that there's an old phrase, a quote, Bernard Baruch, the reason I made so much money is I always sold too soon. And I loved that phrase when I was young, and I would buy something and I'd sell it too soon and then watch it triple and say, what did I do? And so my question is, I've learned that maybe selling too late is better than selling too early, as long as you're not very late. And I'm curious how you think about that. And the is it weekly charts that underpin your strategies? Do you ever go to daily charts? Is that too short of a term?
No, we use daily data. Initially, I started out with monthly data for the models that I built, and then uh, wanted to be more adaptive. So we use daily data in most of the models now. We also look at weekly events. But the effect you describe is actually studied by academics. It's called the disposition effect, where people have a tendency to sell their winners too soon and hold on to their losers too long. And that also creates a headwind so that prices can't advance to their fair value right away. So that again supports the momentum and trend effect.
Right. And so, Gary, let me say, I started in the business. My first 10 years was actually in retail
Mhm.
and I was trying to explain what I do to people that made me different than everyone else. And I was afraid, I was embarrassed to bring up momentum in the beginning. And because it made me seem like just a price chaser. And it turns out that there's really just such a great, powerful effect. And I ended up creating Magnet, which was value growth and momentum. A thin slice of the pie. But what I want to ask you now is I talk to people all the time and they say, I would have told you 6 months ago that, right? It was so obvious that. And so what I'm going to ask you now is not what you'd say in 6 months, but is there anything in your charts that are telling you maybe that's up channel got broken to the upside, and some people will sell when you go past an up channel that makes sense? Or is there anything you're seeing at all, sector, market, um, or even asset class that you'd say, hey, I'm seeing something in my charts, and you probably don't see it yet yourself? Is there anything that fits that bill?
Well, that's what our models do routinely. I mean, we got in, I have a digital asset a model that trades blockchain stocks and Bitcoin, and it got in on a pullback. Let's see on the block model when that happened. Got in, the signal was back here, and then it got in here on September 6th, right at a low point, because we were looking for shorter term momentum and intermediate term momentum to sync up. That's where it happened. And we're long ever since then. Now, with Bitcoin, we use the Bitcoin ETF. We got in just before the breakout, which occurred a few weeks ago. So that you want to have a model that eliminates noise as much as you can, but is sensitive to the trends, and that's what ours do. Our gold model uh, just got out day after elections, and it had held for quite a while. It had a really nice profit in it. So uh, we're long equities, particularly growth and technology, and we're long the digital assets. And right now we're out of gold, and that's pretty much it. You know,
Well, that's why we have you on, Gary. Those are all really brilliant trades. I know some people right now talking gold up right now, and it looks like it, at least in the short term, that was a great trade to get out. And all I could say is that I never believed the Bitcoin story. It still makes me laugh that I was so stubborn, and didn't matter what prices look like. I thought it made no sense to me. I raised my hand. I'm the dummy in the room. Um, all I could say is the trend supports everyone making money right now, and that's fabulous. So look, we're bumping up against the our time frame. The Gary, you've been kind enough to supply us with an article last month in the Pro Investors Insight newsletter. I'll put you on the spot right now. I don't know if we got one for this month. It's due. Do you have one ready for us? Something you've written recently?
no, I don't just crank stuff out. I have to wait until something really shows up that makes sense that I feel like people really should know about. So
Good
I
for
haven't written
you.
anything yet, but when I do, you'll be the first to know, Jordan.
Well, good for you. But so for our readers, let's say that I have read, and I would recommend everybody dual momentum investing. It's Gary Antonacci. Gary, my goal when I started Magda was to learn from the smartest people in the industry. It's a shame it's taken so long for me to meet you, but now that I have, expect me to be around and ask lots of questions. So thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jordan. Nice
All
speaking with
right.
you.
And one more time, I'm glad you survived out in the fields in Vietnam to help all these investors. Thank you for your service. And we'll wrap up saying it's Jordan Kimmel, WealthWise. We'll see you real soon. Thanks for your time, Gary.
Hi everyone, I'm Veronica Dudo, and welcome to Buy,
Hold, sell. If you have the Russians that are going into Ukraine, the Americans and the Germans and everyone else in Europe is going to say, hell no.
If Russia doing things, logically was their MO, I'd agree with you. Yeah, Todd, why don't you get him on a phone call right now? Hello, you.